This meeting is being recorded.
If you're thinking of starting a private pay practice or adding private pay services to your practice, don't assume the patients are just going to pay for it. You have to convince them. How do you do that? Well, my guests today run a private pay physical therapy practice, two guests, and attract patients who could use their insurance with other physical therapists, but do not. They choose them instead, and they're going to tell us how they do it. I'm Carl White, principal at Market Advisory Group, which is a healthcare marketing agency, and I'm also the host of Practice Care. The mission for both is the same, and that's to help private practice owners stay private. Not only is that usually what they want, but care is better when the provider owns the practice, because that's when they're going to have the most freedom to make the clinical decisions for their patients they think are best. It's just different when somebody else owns the practice. Usually, eventually, the agenda of the owner starts to whisper in the ears of the provider, complicates things a bit, just makes the day a bit harder and a bit longer. Let's keep it all private, keep all that out. And today I have two guests. The first is Jeff Bitter. Jeff opened CustomFit Concierge in 2017 to best serve the physical therapy and health needs of the community of Chicago and surrounding areas. This practice was intentionally designed to offer services one-on-one with clients in their home as a private for-hire mobile practice. Jeff has 11 years of experience in physical therapy, and he's certified in TPI for golf and geriatrics and COMT for manual skills. Rick Tilquist is a partner and practicing physical therapist at CustomFit Concierge. He's approaching 10 years of experience treating patients. Rick specializes in helping geriatric patients as well as those with orthopedic, neurological, and weight loss issues. Rick also treats patients with Parkinson's disease. Jeff and Rick, thank you for taking some time to come on Practice Care.
Thanks so much for having us, Carl.
Absolutely. Cool topic. I'm really looking forward to getting into it. All about how do you compete to win in a different way. I think it's what's on a lot of people's minds. Before we get into it, though, want to start where I start with every guest. We need to understand you, just kind of get to know you guys a bit better. The bios that I just read were short. That's what I asked for. But I'm curious, to learn more about you guys and how you guys got together. Jeff, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Carl, for having us. And I just want to, say thank you also for putting out the content that you put out, like kind of the mission of keeping private practice owners private and, putting out information to help support each other. I think is just an awesome concept and an awesome thing that you're doing.
Thank you. That was unplanned. Thank you.
Well, I think I would speak for most of your listeners also, like the people that do it and have private practices or work in private practices. We're very passionate about that, method of owning and running a business. So, and there's not a lot of, resources out there. And as you've described in a lot of episodes, like it's getting a little bit harder and harder, due to all different types of variables. So it's probably content like yours and us coming together and talking about these things that, moves the needle. Moves the needle a little bit and helps support, other people that are like-minded. So thanks for what you do.
Thank you.
But I guess more about myself, coming off of the quick intro. But in the physical therapy world, Rick and I both, had experience working with non-private practice, a lot, but prior to our time opening Custom Fit. So I think, my observation of corporate medicine, I guess, was the fact that I just saw like kind of the quality of care declining, and then also on the business side, the difficulties of being able to pay the bills and have insurance reimbursements, continuing to pay you what you felt like, you were worth or what you were delivering to the patient was getting a little more difficult. So I think, any more specifics about my background, you covered kind of the basics, but I think that the big overview is that, we weren't happy going through a 30 or 40 year medical career, giving poor care. And the main goal of going private and kind of going concierge was to create a system that we were able to best utilize our skills to help people, which is why we all kind of got into that profession. So I guess that's kind of my theme. Rick, a little more about yourself.
Yeah. So kind of similar thing with working with the big box physical therapy places. It just got to a point where there was just too many patients on your caseload where you were seeing 3-4 patients in an hour, and it just didn't feel right. I just didn't feel that I could give the quality that each person deserved and individualize things to them. It became very much so like a cookie cutter approach, which is what we don't do. We do that we do individualized treatments at CustomFit. So Jeff and I ran into each other and we started to chat up ideas, and I was appreciative that he listened. And we've been together ever since. And it was the best change in my career, going from outpatient into concierge.
Okay, great. So it was a shared pain point that brought you two together, kind of, sort of.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Yes, we were both very frustrated. We were frustrated with our previous jobs.
Right, right. And then when did it? So did it come pretty quickly where you said, let's stay in physical therapy, but let's try this sort of private pay model. Let's try, like, how quickly did you guys get there?
I guess for me, like, I wasn't really aware of like the concierge concept, or like another term that they use in PT is cash PT
Sure.
concept,
Mm-hmm.
until there's a couple therapists in our industry that are, I guess, quote unquote influencers, or they've written material, have podcasts, similar to yours, that
Right.
are kind of more niche to the cash PT business model. So
Mm-hmm.
when I guess I had 3 previous jobs. One was for a large outpatient company. One was actually for a small private practice, but through insurance-based care. And then one was through a home health agency through insurance. So I was kind of sifting through 3 different jobs, looking for kind of the job that I loved in our field.
Right.
And I figured out pretty quickly that I couldn't find that. It wasn't there. Right.
Yeah.
Like I just was moving from one frustration to the next. So the timing kind of aligned, when I realized that I've learned about cash PT from these other therapists that were writing material or putting out material about it. And once I learned of that concept, it was an instant kind of light bulb moment for me where I was like, that's what I want. Like, that is exactly, describing what I feel like, the rest of my career should look like. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So how would you compare them when we heard these, when you were learning about it? What were the big differences between what you had been doing and what they were saying?
I think for me, like, the simple answer for me would be, it was a way to remove all of the barriers that I felt like were kind of in place with my other jobs that kept me from, like we talked about at the beginning, giving the best care to the patient. There were so many barriers. Rick mentioned treating multiple people at the same time, right? In any medical profession, like, if you're trying to do the really good care for 4 people at the same time within an hour, like, that care is most likely going to be better if you're doing it for one person in that same hour. So that's like, a sheer kind of time spent with patient was one variable. The insurance side, it was getting harder and harder to do the proper documentation to get, the money that you felt like you deserved for the care that you were delivering. So, that's a big headache and a variable that we all have to kind of deal with in the medical world in some way. And it just felt like in my 10 years, like, that was getting harder and harder and harder. And, the insurance companies were coming in and stopping care when you felt like that wasn't best for the patient, or there were people that you felt like needed the care and it wasn't approved, or, there was always some sort of variable there or hoop that you would have to jump through to help your patient to the best of our abilities. So the concierge concept simply removed a lot of those barriers that were frustrating.
Got it. And Rick, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, another big barrier. Jeff and I were both clinic directors, like we said, for the big box places, and it became more so they were looking at patients as units more so than the person that was coming in there, and that was, very, very frustrating. And the concierge model, that's what appealed to me too, is we're not worried about billing units or anything like that. We could just focus 100% on giving what the patient needs that day and continuing their care that way with it.
Got it. Yeah, it's funny that in dentistry, they call it production. When the dentist is treating patients, production. I need you in production. I'm like, it's a factory. Like, are we pumping out widgets here? What are we talking about? It's just, I don't know. Yeah, I'm with you. So you guys, all right. So you heard,
and the high burnout level as well.
Yeah.
Correct?
I mean, nobody wins,
sorry,
right?
Sorry. The high burnout level. No one does. The patients don't. And then I've seen so many good therapists leave the profession because, seeing 25 people a day for, 3 or 4 years, their passion burns out from it. They can't deliver that quality of care, where with concierge, you could just focus on your smaller group of people and give them 100% and wake up every day being excited to go to work to help them.
Right. Right. So as you both have described it so far, you've described it as, a much better professional life on the private pay side compared to we'll call it the traditional insurance-based side, right? So that's great for you. But now you've got to convince patients to pay you money and forego their insurance for treatment that at least we don't know from the outside looking in that how, different the experience would be with you versus an insurance-based private, physical therapy practice. So let's get to the heart of it. How do you convince patients to private pay and not use their insurance? How do you do this?
I think, if we remove ourselves from healthcare for a second and talk about
Sure.
how do we decide on what we're spending our money on, right? You're exchanging, something of value for something that you feel is lives up to that value, right?
Mm-hmm.
So say it's $100 and you're buying the shirt,
Mm-hmm.
for $100, right? You're in your brain, you're kind of computing, okay, is this purchase, worth my $100, right?
Yeah.
So now you kind of zoom out and go back into healthcare and you say, everyone in the healthcare world is kind of used to this concept of insurance and hopefully feeling like everything's paid for, right? We all pay, so much of our income goes towards healthcare insurance, and the average person wants to say, whatever I need should be covered with all of these insurance payments that I'm making, right?
Right.
So I think using that example in healthcare to be able to have someone be willing to forgo that idea and say, okay, I think my $100 are, better utilized for physical therapy. I think it's about creating something that is worth that value. So when we talk about creating something that's value, it's some of the themes that we mentioned before, right? So we're comparing ourselves to our competitors, which, as we've described before, the quality of care in our industry, unfortunately, is declining a bit because of the volume, right? So if I'm a patient and I hurt my knee and I walk into the clinic down the street, through my insurance, what that kind of user experience looks like is typically you're sitting in the waiting room, you're filling out the paperwork, you're maybe or maybe not getting an appointment, relatively quickly. You're maybe not getting a person that's an expert in knee pain or has the experience in the problem that you're having. So you're kind of rolling the dice, right? So I think in concierge, it's about quick appointments whenever you need them or want them. The one-on-one care, meaning, we're not juggling the 4 people at the one time. We're focused the full hour on delivering the best care to the person in front of us.
Right.
Having clinicians that are experienced and experts in the problem that you're having. So you mentioned earlier, like Parkinson's, or Rick has a specialty in Parkinson's. So the user experience for that patient with, a really difficult progressive neurologic disease that can be really overwhelming to people. Walking into a clinic and, being paired up with a physical therapist that maybe doesn't have a certification in that, or you're waiting 3 or 4 weeks to get in to start that first appointment. So I think, having someone like Rick with 10 years of experience that is specialized in that person's problem, showing up at your door the next day. And, having that full hour to really kind of evaluate that person's situation to be able to deliver the best care, I think creates a value for the person that most likely, and I shouldn't say all, because there's plenty of good experience in physical therapy, but unfortunately the baseline is, as far as quality, is declining. So I think the number one thing is quality of care. I think the second thing is convenience and access, meaning the next day appointment or the appointments that fit around your schedule. The convenience of doing the treatment inside of your home versus having to go to the clinic. I guess those are some of the key themes, I would say.
Okay.
And then I think another thing that I've seen a lot is people that have had bad experiences in healthcare with physical therapy and don't want to have that same experience. So that's next time they have to go, they're willing to pay out of pocket because they don't want to have the same experience that they had before, and they value their health and they value their outcome in a way where they see the difference in the two options, and they're willing to take the option they feel is best for them to reach their goal.
Because so they're switching. They've got the personal experience. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
I would add in there too that the 24/7 communication that we give our patients too. I mean, daily the patients will call or text if they need anything, and you don't have that in a traditional model either. So many times when I was working in the traditional model, they were like, "Oh, we wish we were able to call you or text you. I felt a knee tweak, and should I be doing this?" And I ended up doing 15 or 20 squats and making it worse. Where with us, the rapport is so good, they'll call or text and we'll, prevent a future injury or, make their situation better.
Okay, great. So you said a bunch of really useful things in there. And I just took a couple notes. One was, so yes, the services are different. Maybe not services so much, but sort of how it's delivered. We come to you, don't come to me. A longer amount of time, more personal. That's the construct of the service and how you deliver it. You also mentioned kind of like a segment of the market, those who switch, those who had a previous experience somewhere else, and now they're aware, oh, I don't want that again. I want to see if I can find something different. So the question that I've got is, since you opened, what have you learned? Like, were you always this way, or what have you say you've learned along the way to be more competitive? And I want to throw a couple of like add-ons in there. Do you like target those who have had previous physical therapy experience before, for example? Were you always, at home? Were you always mobile? Or did you open in a certain way and say, boy, we need to switch it up if we want to stay competitive? So with all that as a backdrop, Jeff, lead us off.
With that last point you said, like, do we target people that have had a bad, I wouldn't say that there is a way to necessarily like exactly target those people, but when you are intaking a new patient, that's a question that we always ask, right? Have you had physical therapy before? Tell me about what that experience was. So I think maybe going back to that last conversation, like being able to customize the care from that initial phone call or that initial contact with the person, because it is small private practice and it is concierge, like being able to kind of customize that process all the way through from that initial contact and understand, okay, this patient's coming in that, yes, they have had physical therapy before. Okay, what was that experience like? Sometimes it's a positive experience. Hey, it was great. I had a really good therapist. This is how it went. Understanding, okay, they just gave me something there. They enjoyed this, and this. Like, that's probably something we should deliver for this patient because they just told us what they value.
Yeah.
Or that initial phone call is, yes, I've had a previous physical therapy experience, and no, it was horrible. Like I couldn't get in for the first appointment for 6 weeks. Okay, they value a quick appointment.
My knee still hurts.
I got someone that I felt like wasn't experienced with the problem that I had. The patient or the therapist was juggling multiple patients at the same time, and I felt like I was just showing up to do these exercises that I could do on my own. They're giving you a lot of tidbits there. Then it's like, okay, let's get this person in, same day or next day appointment that checks one box. Let's give them the personalized care and kind of customize the process to fit what that person's value. What that person values.
Right. And how quickly do you tell them, do you make it clear, this is private pay, there's no insurance here?
that's always one of the first questions they typically ask, right? Like
Okay.
they're just like we're evaluating if they're a good fit for our practice. They're trying to sort out whether they're willing to see us versus the other person too. So they always ask, do you take insurance?
Mm-hmm.
And, we have to, that's one of the more difficult conversations to have, because
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of people out there that are not familiar with concierge. They don't
Mm-hmm.
understand that that is an option. They're assuming that, if, most medical places accept some forms of insurance. So being able to have that conversation and say, no, we do not accept insurance. We are a concierge. I always kind of describe it as it's kind of like you're hiring a private physical therapist to come to your home.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that conversation is accepted like, oh, cool, like that's great, like that sounds like something I really would like to hear more about. And then other people are, I really do want to use my insurance. They're very focused on kind of the financial side of it, and where you have to peel back some of the layers to determine, okay, like, is this person really a good fit for the practice or not? And you have to understand too that it is not for everyone. But I think the macro view of customers out there seeking healthcare, I believe that the percentage of people willing to entertain the idea of concierge, that population of people is growing.
Yeah. And it just seems like and not just in physical therapy, but primary care, anything that looks like primary care, it just feels like it gets squeezed on the reimbursement side a little more every year.
Sure.
And so you've got to, your throughput has to be higher, and it just feels like a few more people every year are going to peel off and go, I don't want to be treated that way anymore. You're not bad people. It's such a tough system. And they're a little more willing to go, an hour at home, that sounds nice.
I totally agree.
Yeah. So
agree.
you got to believe it's a growing market. Rick, anything you would add to what Jeff was saying?
No, I think he did a great job explaining it. I wouldn't add anything. That was really good, Jeff.
Okay. Well, then, Rick, let me start with you on this one. Since you've been 7 years in, 7 years in since you started this, you clearly have figured a bunch of important things out because your doors are still open and you're growing. What were some of the big lessons you guys have learned, since you opened?
I would say just, it starts at that first visit of getting to know the person. Like, retention is big in this as well with it, because we don't have a whole bunch of referrals always coming in. So just proving our value. So we're results based, so I always tell people, if they're on the edge as far as going concierge or going with their insurance, just give me one shot and I'll make you feel a little bit better that first time. So it starts after that first visit, making an impact that day, to have them buy into us, and then we give our all to them.
That's neat. The try before you buy, that's the sort of the generic way to say it. I'm not asking you to sign up today. Just give us a shot, and then you decide and compare and filter it through your decision making.
Yeah, and in the beginning,
that's how confident we are. Just give us a
shot,
shot, and then you make the decision.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
I like that. Jeff, what would you say? What have you guys learned along the way?
I think I learned, I think in the healthcare community nowadays, like, so much of the conversation is talking about money and talking about insurance and talking about like all these variables that don't necessarily directly relate to why the person needs care in the first place. Like, is really frustrating to me, so I think in our model, being able to strip some of those variables away and just, on that first phone call with the patient, instead of the whole conversation being about, all these payment variables in insurance, like making it about, okay, like, tell me about the injury that you're having and how it's affecting your life, and getting to know the human being, and then being able to back engineer it, and say, like, this is how this injury is affecting someone's life, and being able to make it about their result and their outcome, and strip all those other things away. And unfortunately, that's becoming really rare in healthcare. And I think the concierge business model, at least from my perspective, is one of the only ways to be able to come back to that come back to that, original thing. Like if you back up, 60 or 70 years, obviously I wasn't around, but
Me either. Yeah.
Well,
the way it used to be. Yeah.
Well, doctors back in the day, they used to go to people's homes on a regular basis. And, if someone was bedridden or had an illness, like the doctor would come to your door, and the doctor would kind of have a skill set that was he or she was a specialist in, all the different things. And now everyone is so specialized, right? And you've got to go to the big hospital to wait for the appointment and sit there forever to be able to have the 5 or 10 minutes with the person.
Yeah.
And, we've just got so far away from that original kind of function that healthcare should be in people's lives. And I think this brings us back to, that original way.
Right. Right. And today you guys have, how many therapists do you have sort of throughout Chicagoland?
We have eight of us right now.
Okay.
So small private practice, one admin or office employee that works out of her home and helps to coordinate everything on the backside of the business. And then 8 therapists kind of that cover different specialties and drive around in their mobile clinics and show up at your door.
Right. But you didn't start with 8, or maybe you did, but I'm assuming you started smaller. So
very small. Yeah.
This is working, right? I mean, what, if you had to pinpoint, why do you think it's working? Maybe if we already covered it, just say so. And what gave you the confidence to grow, to add more?
Why I think it is working is, like we talked about before, like people are getting increasingly annoyed by the lack of quality of care in healthcare. And for that reason, I think the concierge concept in multiple specialties is becoming more popular, and it's becoming more likely for the clinicians and the patients to be seeking that out for the reasons we described before. On the clinician side, you can treat less people and treat them better, which is what most clinicians want to do. On the patient side, you can have that kind of one-on-one personal care of, someone that's an expert in what you have going on. So I think, those are the reasons why, there's enough employees and enough patients that are wanting, this type of care. And then from a business perspective, like you alluded to earlier, like since I've been a PT, insurance reimbursement has steadily decreased. Like that variable is slightly going down every year. Recently, especially like the cost of doing business, the cost of materials, the cost of rent, the cost of, taxes, the cost of every single cost that you can think of is steadily going up at a higher rate, most likely than
inflation hurts. Yeah.
Well, from a business perspective, like you said, if what you're being paid is going down and the cost of doing it is going up, that relationship is not going to end well, or the only thing in healthcare that we can do to keep up the pace is increase the volume. And by increasing the volume, you're decreasing the quality.
And around and around it goes. Yes.
Around and around it goes. So,
and to add to that too, I mean, I think why you've been successful too is, with the traditional outpatient model, your insurance gives you 12, 15, 20 visits, right?
That's true.
And if you're not completely satisfied, it doesn't really matter. Here's your home exercise program. Then the therapist hopes the patient does it. And studies show 17% of people do their home exercise program. So the cycle repeats. So then they don't do their exercise program. Then they're back in the clinic, and it just keeps going. So I feel a big part of our success also comes from the longevity side of things, that, okay, we're going to help you stay on track, and we're going to continue to progress you. Let's make you the best you, right? Just because you're dealing with this knee injury now, let's take care of that. And then what's the next step? What do we work on next? So we just keep on building the patient to become a better person themselves physically.
Yeah. It's like an epic example of, if you want something done right, you just got to do it yourself, get the other people out of the way. This is great. I mean, there's so many more questions I could ask, so many marketing questions I could ask you, but we are more about this kind of bite-sized advice here on this podcast. So a couple of wrap-up questions that I ask every guest. The first one is there anything you think I should have asked you in the context of what we're talking about that listeners ought to know about, but I just didn't ask you about?
That's
I mean,
a good
I have
question.
one, but you go first.
Rick, what do you got?
Was there the question I would say, was there a fear going from the traditional model into the concierge
That's
model?
kind of related to what I had. So yeah, go
as a
for
therapist?
it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I could answer that, and the answer is 100% yes. But at the same time, if you have confidence in your skills and in your results, and the love and care you have for people, that's what pushed me to all of a sudden be like, concierge is the way to go. Got to work a little bit harder, but at the same time, it was totally worth the jump, if you want to say. But in the beginning, it was it's rough to build up your caseload, but once you do it, it's awesome. It's a good work-life balance. And
Yeah.
I never would have said those words 8-9 years ago
At ATI, right, or any of the similars. The question I was going to ask is, it just seems to be, well, you have to believe that whatever it is you're going to charge is worth it. Like, you have to believe it before anybody else will. And you can't throw a football without hitting a provider somewhere that says, oh, they'd never pay for that. Or some patient who says, I'll never pay for that. And it could get in your head. It's like it's already planted. It's like a byproduct of the insurance model. You go to the grocery store and everything's out of pocket and nobody thinks twice. It's the way it's always been. You guys have a different model. And so if you don't believe it, like, did you believe it right away? Or did you have doubts? Can you talk about this? Like, you got to believe it,
Definitely not. Like Rick alluded to, I think there's a fear from the clinician side, because we when you go to school in medical, and I know your background is marketing, so maybe for you it was different, but in medical, it's all you're learning all about the clinical side and the knowledge and the skill that you're having to have. You don't learn anything about the marketing and the sales side. And I think as clinicians, like, we've never had to put on like kind of the sales hat, meaning like talking about money with a patient or selling your services necessarily. And in concierge, for the first time, you have to do that. And it's a really uncomfortable thing that most clinicians aren't confident with and don't. And like, to answer your question, you don't feel like you're worth it sometimes. And I think the biggest piece of advice I could give for someone that maybe is starting to think about it is charging what you're worth, or figuring out what to charge. Because if, like we talked about from the business, if the reimbursement's going down and the cost of business going up, if you flip to concierge and then you don't charge enough, which is the normal mistake that I made at the beginning, for sure. Then you're just putting yourself in the same scenario again. So you really have to understand the business side of it to be able to charge what is fair and the right value for the service that you're giving, but also can support the business and make it what you're wanting it to be in the long run. So that aspect of it was very challenging and was really difficult, and you have to kind of learn by trial and error a little bit, and fall on your face a couple times, like not being comfortable with the sales. But just like anything, with experience and repetition, you get more comfortable, you get more confident, and with time, then when you start to see you being able to deliver the great care and trust that you are worth it, and see that people are interested in it, and you kind of get some traction, then that gives you the confidence then to continue, I would say. But it took, I think, me 6 months to a year to really kind of get comfortable and confident with that, I would say, at the beginning.
Sure. And Rick, I'll ask you this one. Does every therapist have to do the selling? Or do you, when a call comes in or a lead comes in, are they more centralized and then you kind of assign them to a therapist? Because the reason I ask is when you hire therapists, they got to buy into this too, right? They're not just passively treating patients, but they have to buy into this too, right?
For sure.
100%. So our front office usually is the direct point of contact with them, where she talks with the patient about packages. But sometimes too, when we have something called like a word of mouth referral, which is a patient referring a friend or family member, we go in there and then we'll also do, the marketing side of things, as well as, discuss about the sessions and everything like that. So
Okay.
we do have help with it, but our therapists are expected to know how to do that as well. And I want to go back one more time. Sorry to revert back, but
No, go ahead.
talking about, knowing your worth. That was the big jump with it. We're kind of brainwashed as therapists in the outpatient settings or home health or whatever, that this is your worth and that's it, right? And that took a little bit of time, like Jeff said, 6 months to a year, to really feel that, hey, I'm helping someone get their life back. This is worth the payment that they're, paying us. And the patients will agree that, hey, when you give me my life back, it's, that's worth more than anything. So
got it. That's the motivation. Excellent. And then the other wrap-up question I ask every guest is, so let's imagine we've caught a listener's attention, hopefully more than one, and they're enthusiastic about making the switch to private pay, getting started in it, even adding a private pay service, but they're stuck. They just don't know where to start. Oftentimes people can get really enthusiastic about something new, but they just have no idea where to start. With what you guys know, are there like one or two super simple things that you could recommend they do just to kind of get off that starting line and get moving?
I'd say the first thing that comes to my mind is not really like a direct to the point, do this, but it's more of like switching your mindset. Like, so I felt when I started to think about like starting this type of practice, like I was intimidated. I never thought of myself as like a business owner or someone that wanted to start a practice. That was never something like I viewed as my future. But when I started to think about it for the first time, I kind of thought of it from the perspective of like, what's the worst that can happen? Like if I fail, right? So, okay, I'm going to try this. Well, the nice thing about, having a medical degree, we have really good, for the most part, we have really good stability of our career. So we can most likely find a job somewhere that pays really well, that has good benefits. There's not a lot of like jobless healthcare professionals out there, right?
Sure. You have to be pretty bad to take that
my
moniker,
mindset,
right?
my mindset was like, I'm frustrated with these 3 other jobs because of all these barriers that I can't, give the patients good care. What's the worst that could happen here? Okay, I fail, and then I go back to these jobs, that I know will be there, in a year or 6 months. Why not try? So if anyone's listening that's like contemplating trying, I guess maybe just taking the mindset of like, what's the worst that can happen? I will always have my stable job that I'm currently in. Rip off the Band-Aid and do it, because the downside is what you have right now.
That's the worst. There you go. Rick, what about you?
And once you do this, I could confidently 100% say I could never see myself going back into an outpatient clinic and reverting back to the way of doing it that way. 100%, this was like the best move I've ever made for my family, patient care in my life.
Yeah. And Jeff, you hit on something, like we just said it a few minutes ago, but you better believe this. Like you better be able to visualize yourself talking to a patient and saying, with us, it's 150 an hour, 200, whatever it is. And you better believe in what you're saying, because if you don't, it's, the day you open is going to be your last day. If you doubt it, you're never going to be able to convince anybody else. Like authentically convince, not a slick way, but authentically. Because if you don't, man, you got about a week, and then you might as well just shut the doors. Don't burn the cash,
Well, if you walk into a store and you're contemplating buying something and the person selling it to you, you can tell is not confident that the price that is on the item, is worth it. And you can sense that. What's your likelihood that you're going to buy that item? Right?
Very low. Exactly.
Very low.
Even if you can't put your finger on it, like, it doesn't seem worth it.
Correct.
And yes, it starts with the person, promoting it. Excellent. Sure. Jeff and Rick, thank you guys so much.
You make them believe the results, right?
Believe the results, believe the buy-in.
You don't have to convince. If you make them believe, you make them feel better. That's the key to this.
Yeah. And I'm going to go back before I was about to start wrapping up, but just go back to something you said, Jeff, which is the trajectory of reimbursements going down, even if it goes up, but inflation eats more of it, it's going down, right? So you look at these numbers and you say, how many more years of this do I really want to tolerate before the revenue line and the cost line cross in the wrong way? I mean, if I see it coming, how many more, why would I think that would change and at least do something? Rick, you said, maybe I just, I won't go back to that. And you might force yourself, what am I going to do now? But at least you're leaving something is just not satisfying. So yeah.
Sure.
Cool. This has been great, guys. I really appreciate this. You guys taking the time. Rick is between patients right now. I think he's sitting in a parking lot, finishing up this interview, waiting to go see a patient.
Yes, I am.
Yes,
yeah,
you are. So I really appreciate it. We've had more and more, not an avalanche of guests coming on and talking about just alternative ways to practice. And I don't mean clinically alternative, but business model alternative ways. So you guys are definitely adding to that conversation. And hopefully you've helped some folks, and collectively that will help some folks. So thank you both for coming on Practice Care. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having us, Carl. And thanks again for
having us.
what you do and putting these conversations out there.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And you both supplied contact information, which we will get in the show notes for this episode. So anybody who wants to get a hold of you, now they have another way to do it. And a couple of points before we wrap up. First, if you are like Jeff and Rick and you are private practice owners who've got some experience on the business side of healthcare, that a private practice that you think others would benefit from, or someone like me who serves them and has some experience you think would benefit, either way, we want you to come on Practice Care and tell the world about it. In the show notes to this episode and every episode, there's a link, a couple of questions. It's really easy. Tell us what's on your mind so we can get you scheduled as soon as possible. And finally, I say this every week, please subscribe to Practice Care. We are on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're on YouTube, we're on Amazon, pretty much every player and platform. We do a new episode every week. And the easiest way to stay up to date is to subscribe. Just search Practice Care, one word, Google anywhere you want. You'll see us, subscribe, easy peasy. Thanks very much, and until next time.